here, be really early, and be in the last day of NEC. So it's great having you. So I'm Tania de la Garza. I'm from the Caribbean Development Bank, and it's a pleasure really, to kick off the last day of the NEC and with a World Cafe session. I know this World Cafe is a little bit different from what we know, but we want to do the best of this. And the best of this is giving you voice, to hear you about what you are struggling and facing in your countries around the development and strengthening of M&E systems. So again, it's a great pleasure to have you. So the dynamics, considering that we already spent a lot of time talking about M&E systems and knowing each other, let me present you all the panelists in this session. This is a complex session because we're going to have two perspectives. The regional perspectives with my colleagues and the national perspectives in the four groups that we're going to discuss. So we will begin with this panel, the regional one, and this panel will last 30 minutes. So afterwards, we will divide in four groups. So the four groups will be regional divided. The first group will be over there with Takunda from the Clear AA. He will be moderating. Step up. Great, Taku. The second one will be with Sohini from Clear SA. Thank you, Sohini. Then the third panel will be with Licia Lima, and she's from Clear Lab. And the fourth, because I have to say the because if not, I'm not being inclusive. So the fourth will be with Chantal Aragon from Clear LAC. So thank you again for that. But let me start with the panelists over here. So the panelists, this panel will, as I told you, will last 30 minutes. And as I said, because it's the last day of NEC, we want to be a very honest, straightforward conversation. So we won't have presentations. We want your voice to be heard, okay? So let's start with this panel. Thank you so much for being here. So this panel, the people that are with me here are from development banks. So let me start presenting. First is Karen Roth-Monsterman, is the Evaluator General of the African Development Bank, heading the Independent Development Evaluation Function from IDEF. IDEF produces a range of evaluation of the AFDVs, work each year, and also undertakes knowledge management, stakeholder engagement, evaluation capacity development, and partnerships. Karen joined IDEF in June 2014 as Division Manager for Knowledge Management, Outreach, and Capacity Development, before becoming Evaluator General in April 2022. Prior to IDEF, she worked in the AFDV's Resource Mobilization Department, responsible for the 3-yearly replenishment process of the African Development Fund and the allocation of ADF resources to African countries. She holds a master's degree in political science, European studies, and economics. Thank you so much, Karen, for being here. Emil Salim is passionate about evaluation capacity development and evaluation influence. At the Inter-American Development Bank's Office of Evaluation and Oversight, he coordinates the Evaluation Capacity Development Program and leads the communication strategy. Emil brings valuable experience from his previous role as capacity building and communications coordinator at Clear LAC and his time as a university professor in Mexico. Hi, Emil. Thank you for coming. And Serena Rossignoli is currently the head of evaluation at the Caribbean Development Bank. She leads a dynamic team and has over 15 years of international experience in evaluation and development, spanning 4 continents. She holds a PhD in evaluation and a Master in Development Studies from the London School of Economics. She has successfully managed evaluations, strategic planning, capacity building, and partnership with international organizations championing gender equality and pioneering innovative evaluation initiatives such as real-time evaluations. Her career includes leadership roles in institutions such as UNESCO, UNDP, and FAO. So this panel, colleagues, is about national M&E systems. It's about how context, culture, and specificness of each country shape their systems. So these colleagues that I just presented to you will discuss some of that questions from a regional perspective. So what we're going to do is I'm going to ask some questions, then I'm going to give you the microphone and you're going to answer. Thank you so much. So Karen, let's start with you. What are the common challenges international financial institutions face in helping countries establish or strengthen national monitoring and evaluation systems?
Thank you, Tanya, for inviting me to be a part of this panel. So indeed, at the African Development Bank, we do try to help countries establish and strengthen their national monitoring and evaluation systems, like some of the other colleagues here on the stage. Let me mention three challenges that we often face. I would say first challenge is often a lack of understanding of M&E, and particularly evaluation. What is evaluation? How does it differ from monitoring? How does it differ from audit? What's the purpose? What's it for? How does it work? Sometimes there's also mistrust of evaluation. Who is it for? What is it going to be used for? By who is it going to be used? Does it only focus on negative aspects? Are you only here to find out what's wrong? Why should we participate? So lack of understanding of evaluation, sometimes even mistrust, I would say, is a first challenge. And that can be related to, let's say, a lack of a culture of evaluation. You mentioned culture. So that's a first challenge. A second challenge that I would say we often face is low capacity to implement monitoring and evaluation. Many countries face resource constraints. They're unable to mobilize enough domestic resources to fund their spending needs. They depend on external finance, on borrowing. And then there are many priorities competing for the same limited resources. Countries have many needs: security, agriculture, infrastructure, health, education. And then investing in monitoring and evaluation is just one more spending area asking for resources. And we also need to recognize that some countries are still transitioning out of a post-conflict situation. They're rebuilding their country, rebuilding their capacity, or perhaps they're even still facing certain elements of fragility, like insecurity or climate change, extreme weather events. So that's the reality on the ground that must be recognized and that we face as a challenge, so low capacity. And then thirdly, let me mention data and information. I think this has probably come up at this conference before. We all know that the quality and the usefulness of monitoring and evaluation is highly dependent on the quality of the inputs that go into the monitoring and evaluation system. And many countries face challenges with the quality of data, with the regularity of data, the reliability of data, the collection and the verification and the aggregation of data from the local level to the provincial level to the national level. Also the frequency, the quality of the reporting. And if you want to monitor or evaluate whether a policy or a program or some other intervention is having differential effects on different groups of people, such as women versus men, the youth, rural versus urban, you also need disaggregated data, which is not always available. And of course, as we all know, for a credible and impartial evaluation, we need to triangulate different sources of data, evidence, information, all of which cost resources. So quality of data and information is also a challenge. Now, there are many other challenges too, like turnover of staff, but let me leave it at those three for now.
Thank you so much. Actually, you pointed out three main challenges that can be not only seen in the African region, but I think in other regions as well. That it's the understanding of evaluation. We don't have a common language within the governments, so it's difficult actually to start shaping the M&E. Low capacity, so that's why also the CLEAR initiative is also focusing on this, on strengthening the capacity of the public officers within the countries and data and information. Not only the generation of it, but the quality of it, right? So thank you so much, Karen. Emil, please. What strategies or action do IFIS advocate to overcome these challenges?
Thanks for the question, Tania, and thanks for the previous answer, actually, Karen. It is so useful. Latin America and the Caribbean is also a region where we see evaluation triggering some resistance as well. In some circles, it's had the reputation of being punitive, not oriented towards learning. However, I would like to explain the challenges in two different ways. First, external challenges, that is the challenges of the M&E systems and the capacities within those systems themselves, and internal challenges, the challenges evaluation offices have to face within their own mother institution, within their own banks. So first, I'll go with the external challenges. Latin America and the Caribbean is also a very diverse region, and there are different levels of M&E awareness and M&E institutionalization among and within countries in the region. Latin America and the Caribbean is the scenario where we have countries such as Mexico, Chile, Brazil, with very much developed M&E systems, and other countries that actually have the opportunity to learn a lot from their experiences. For instance, there is also the experience of Costa Rica, which has been very successful in strengthening its own M&E system for the past 10 years or so. There's a second external challenge, and it's very much related to the idea of creating a common language that both Karen and Tania mentioned. It is in Latin America and the Caribbean, in many places, in many circles, impact evaluation has become the gold standard for evaluation. And for many people, it's the only true way of conducting evaluations. Of course, this leaves on the side all the benefits and potential uses, the who, the for what, that Karen was mentioning, of other ways of conducting evaluations. That's another challenge we're facing in Latin America and the Caribbean. For instance, we've been to a couple of countries where we try to bridge some gaps between the academia and the public sector, and the academia is, no, we don't talk with them because they don't know how to conduct evaluation. Of course, having in mind the impact evaluation, right? So that's been challenging too. Third, as a contextual challenge is the language and contextual barriers to M&E knowledge, which is often crafted for other regions and to fulfill needs that not necessarily correspond to those of the M&E systems in Latin America and the Caribbean. There's a lot of knowledge out there, but for instance, mostly in English. So you get automatic translations, but it's not quite the same thing. The examples are not fit for the region, for instance. Finally, of the external challenges, there's a lot of concentration of cooperation resources for M&E in several countries, right? So it starts becoming some sort of regressive strategy. So those who have benefited in the past are the better fit to keep on strengthening their own M&E systems, because it's easier for cooperation resources to go there, right? These external challenges generate the opportunity of raising M&E awareness and strengthening M&E institutions, considering the particularities of the context. That's how we see it. And finally, there are a couple of internal challenges. those challenges that the offices of evaluation face within their own financial institutions in which they work, of their immediate environment, which are, on the one hand, they mostly have as a primary mandate to evaluate the work of the operations and management of their own institutions, not explicitly always ECD activity. So that's challenging on the one hand. And on the other, there is also some sort of fragmentation of the ECD functions, of the evaluation capacity development functions within the institutions. For many, evaluation capacity development is part of a technical cooperation that should be conducted by management, for instance. So there's also some tension and the opportunity to better engage with management towards common evaluation goals for the systems and evaluation capacity development in the region, right? So that's in general what I think are the challenges the IFIs face.
Thank you so much, Emil, but actually I think it complements a lot Karen's vision with these external challenges, because what we're talking about is that countries not only have the control within, there are external things that also affect and shape their M&E systems. And you were talking about, first, the regional diversity, and you put the example of Latin America, where there's a lot of difference between the regions. So the strategies that you as IFI have been taken could not be the same for all of it. The second is the common language that also Karen pointed out, but not only within government, but within other key stakeholders, like academia. And I think that to match the timely or the methodologies that you can use, for example, you talk about impact evaluation, when maybe outcome evaluation should be the one that will be more helpful for the countries. And first, that although there's a lot of resources around the world, around evaluation, maybe they are not quite customized for the region. And in the case of Latin America and the Caribbean, the language barrier, no, but there are almost always in English, and here you have in Spanish mainly, so it's not quite easy to use it. So thank you so much for pointing out. So our third panelist, Serena, I'm going to ask you another question, please. So could you identify how the uniqueness of the region, culture, and situation is reflected in the choices or decisions and the priority that you as IFI define? Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Tanya, for the question. I think it's very relevant for the region CDB works on, which is the Caribbean region. And I want also to thank Emil for speaking about the Latin American region. I'm going to touch this point also, the Caribbean region. And thank you, Karen. You make some very interesting points, which are, and challenges which are clearly common also into the Caribbean region. So as you know, I mean, the Caribbean, sorry, I'm just having my computer because I want just to mention a few data and I have a very bad memory. So the Caribbean clearly face, as you know, significant economic fragility, particularly, to the small size of the countries, limited resources, and high vulnerability to natural disasters. So just to give you some example, 9 out of 12 countries had double-digit GDP declines in 2020 due to COVID pandemic. Disaster damage as a percentage of GDP is 6 times higher in the Caribbean compared to larger economies. But also the regional integration is very complicated, despite, such a unique region will benefit from, economies of scale. But regional integration in the Caribbean is very complicated. First of all, because of the economic disparities, things that the region includes countries like Guyana, which is benefiting from oil resources, but also countries such as Haiti, which face several, high stability. But also there is, geographic dispersion and very, difficult integration, including, logistics, like transport across the region is very complicated. But also the region is characterized as, as also my colleagues mentioned, resource constraints. I think that we are speaking about very small countries where public officials, they have to cover multiple sectors. So, for example, when it comes to, stakeholder engagement in the Caribbean is very difficult. It's very difficult even, to secure participation in training. So these are, has to give us the input to think, in a different way when we plan for activities in the region. But also, the Caribbean ranks lowest in the World Bank statistical performance indicator. 9 countries in the region are classified by the World Bank as data deprived, so having only one poverty estimate or less over 10-year period. So you can imagine how this can impact, decision making. The Caribbean doesn't have any data. The Caribbean region doesn't have any data on SDG 1 and 10. And then clearly, as in other regions, we have a lack of evaluation culture, but, it's important to notice that in the region, for example, there is a lack of professional evaluation networks, which are less prevalent than in other regions. But also, as I mentioned at the beginning, the Caribbean is very vulnerable to natural disasters, which clearly emphasize the need to think, to different evaluation tools. Just to give you some example, from 1950 to 2014, the region faced 238 disasters, with economic implication of equal to 1.82% of the GDP. And in some cases, economic impact has exceeded 100% of the GDP. So what are the implications? We need to think, in a different way. And I think what you mentioned, Emil, is very important, because we cannot think about conducting impact evaluation in this context, first of all, because we don't have data, and secondly, because we have different needs. So we need rapid tools that we can apply to get, rapid answers. So what are the implications, of this uniqueness of the Caribbean? First of all, we need to tailor solutions. So we cannot think about, having national M&E systems which can be adapted, from other experience with, from our larger countries, because the geographical and economic context is completely different. We need to have a systematic approach. We cannot, because of the lack of resources, we cannot just think about working on a sectorial basis, but we need to involve, for example, a civil society organization, the academia, as you mentioned. We need to think beyond training. Training is just a part of, the solution, but it's not, the only solution. So we need to think in a more systematic way, like, providing technical assistance, but, also flexible solution for, a region that lack of resources. We need to work on, fostering regional integration, so sharing experiences across the Caribbean countries, but also, sharing experiences from similar countries, so small islands as the Caribbean. And we need to be able to pilot, test different approaches to see which one better answer the needs of the region. And then, as I mentioned, we need to think about what are the best evaluation tools that can answer the needs of this region. So I stop here for the moment.
Thank you so much. When you took a deep dive in the region, in the Caribbean, I think you pointed out some of real key challenges that we often, I don't know if it's the right word to say forget, but we take as granted for the region. And some of the things is that within the region, there are a lot of disparities that you have to take into account when you do this. Of course, there will be countries that are already shaped their M&E systems, but also they have a lot of resources, not only financial, but in terms of capacity and in terms of collaboration and cooperation with agencies in order to keep on moving their M&E system. And there are other countries that you cannot do a lot because of the fragility, because of the context, and because there is a lot of political issues that cannot. And one of the examples that you pointed out was Haiti. So in this disparity, all this uniqueness, is pointing out that the actions should be really customized, should be really accordingly to context, but also taking into account what you need M&E for. You said, you pointed out a couple of data, noticing what are the main issues or challenges that the Caribbean countries face each year. So for the natural disasters, being islands, being small, of course, take into account, but maybe they are not like similar like Latin America, but maybe they can learn a lot from other countries like the Pacific Islands. So maybe it's not only the regional vision that we should be aware of, but the context that we can learn from other regions, and that you as IFIS can help the countries and can help us to understand better ways to learn from each other. So that's why I'm going to ask the last question for all the panel. So now we're going to answer in the other way. We start with Serena, Emil, and then Karen, please. So what lessons have been learned at the regional level to strengthen national M&E systems? And accordingly to this, how can regional cooperation assist in addressing these challenges?
Okay, so I'm going probably to repeat myself a bit. But I mean, I think the first point is that we need to have solutions which are specifically tailored for the context. So they have to be context specific, particularly in countries in region as the Caribbean. One lesson is that we need to take into account what is the reality. While we keep in mind long-term objectives, but we need also to deal with the reality. So, for example, again, impact evaluation. In a region where there is a lack of quantitative data, it's almost impossible to conduct any impact evaluation. So what are the solutions that we can put in place while we build and foster, a culture of data? So why, for example, qualitative evaluation, which is a bit the Cinderella, I will say, of the evaluation system. So why we don't use any qualitative evaluation, for example? As I mentioned, flexible training, particularly because public officials in the region, in the Caribbean region, are very busy, so we cannot expect high participation of those people in international training. And I can tell you the experience of the Caribbean Development Bank. We really try in several occasions, to engage stakeholder participation in the region in those training, but it's very challenging and difficult. So why don't, think about flexible solutions like online training or short modules that can answer, to specific needs of those actors. And then, as I mentioned before, the added value of regional organization as CDB is, having this regional perspective and working on, trying to integrate the regional system and, fostering exchange across those countries. For example, we are thinking about, establishing some community of practice on monitoring and evaluation across, the Caribbean countries so they can exchange their experience and good practices. And then, as I mentioned before, piloting and, trying and see whether, which is the approach that better suit the needs of the region.
Thanks for that reply, Serena. It's also very related to the messages I want to get across in this slot. Regarding the particular lessons first, and also talking to the context, to the changing context and the culture, we consider that understanding the particularities of the context is essential to crafting meaningful evaluation products and services. And we have had a very nice a very nice experience in Guatemala, working with the Secretariat of Planning and Programming, and here's the director of M&E from Segeplan, from the Secretariat. He won't let me lie, as we would say in Spanish. We've had a very nice experience there, because we've been working along with them in many ways, but what we did for the first several months was to try to understand their everyday challenges on how to build a strong and resilient M&E system in Guatemala. That took us not only to deliver or craft with them the technical parts, such as, let's say, an evaluation guidelines, but also to understand who are the other key players in the field they need to talk to make this happen. Because at the end of the day, a system is made of connections, of links among key actors that could or should be striving towards a common goal. So understanding who are these key actors, what they bring to the table, and how the institution with the clearest M&E mandate in Guatemala can bring them together towards a common goal was our first challenge. There was no one-size-fits-all solution in this case. That's perhaps a first lesson I want to bring to this table. A second one is also, and speaking particularly, Tania, to your first question about culture. What does culture mean when you're trying to achieve evaluation capacity development goals? It could mean several different things. However, we try to narrow it down to understanding the habits of information consumption and learning of our counterparts. Understanding what are the everyday challenges at their offices to conduct M&E work. What do you really need when you go down to your desk for the next 8 hours to be successful? What can you show for at the end of the day? Understanding those triggers is essential to build not only individual capacities, but to take a step forward towards institutional capacities, which is basically the main goal of our technical cooperations, for instance, in Guatemala. And we have another one in El Salvador that has provided a very interesting experience. And this one takes me to a third lesson. If you want to enter M&E systems, you don't always need to take the main door. You don't always need to go only to the institution with the most explicit mandate of M&E. For instance, in El Salvador, we couldn't really find a contact person or a liaison in the Ministry of Planning, but actually we had a contact in the Ministry of Natural Resources. And we started working with them to strengthen their M&E system for natural resources and tracking. And we're working with them and developing capacities with them and for other 90 institutions in 3 different levels of government. Municipalities, other ministries. So this is another key lesson. You don't always need to enter through the main door to help strengthen M&E systems. Finally, another lesson we've learned is that we need to take the opportunities, the windows of opportunities that open with political changes in the region. We've been working with Guatemalan authorities for almost 3 years, and since they had a new national administration that is very open and very interested in M&E, we've advanced a lot the M&E agenda. Now we have a formal working group with public officials officially designated by their own authorities and institutions to help craft a strategy to build this M&E system and make it work. So it really makes a difference. Timing is of essence. That's another lesson. Last but not least, as I mentioned before, Latin America is a scenario where many different development institutions work towards M&E goals and try to strengthen M&E systems, and these can get messy. So cooperation is the name of the game. And it would be very much useful if we could all sit down on the same table, as we're doing in Guatemala, for instance, craft a common vision, and do some labor division. right? We all have different characteristics. We all bring different resources to the region. So let's try to make the most of them, right? That's why we continuously engage in different spaces. For instance, the National Evaluation Capacities Index opens up very important spaces. We also engage with the Global Evaluation Initiative. And that's how we're trying to work with others so we can make the most of the resources we're putting in our region to develop our M&E systems and capacities in our region, right? So those are the 4 key lessons I found that I think might be useful to bring to this discussion. Thank you.
So the main lesson I draw from my 10 years of experience in supporting the development of national M&E systems at IDEV is that the best learning happens from peers. And this can be peers in the region, like Emil mentioned, Latin American countries learning from Brazil or Costa Rica or Guatemala. But as Serena was talking about some of the challenges that Caribbean countries face, I was thinking some of the African island states like Cabo Verde or Sao Tome, Comoros, Seychelles, they probably face the same challenges. So peers can be outside the region as well. But I think it helps to share knowledge and experience with other countries building their national M&E system who are like you or who have similarities, characteristics that you have in common that enable you to learn from each other. And in Africa, we have a great initiative called Twende Mbele, which means moving forward together in Swahili. And I see some of the members and also the secretariat. I see Amanda smiling at me. And this is an initiative. This started with 3 countries, Benin, South Africa, and Uganda, who found that they were each building their national M&E system. They were trying to develop their national system, and they started to exchange experience. And they started to exchange tools that they were using in their national M&E system, and learning from each other. And this initiative grew. They found some funding. They went on a study tour to, I think, Mexico. And this initiative of exchanging experience, learning from each other, grew. It now covers 6 countries, and it's still growing. Other countries are wanting to join, and so that has really helped each of these countries to strengthen different aspects of their NME system. So they decide what are the aspects that they want to focus on, how they want to learn from each other, whether it be doing, let's say, a study or hiring a consultant to develop certain guidelines or certain M&E methodologies, or organizing a symposium whereby each shares experience. And everyone brings something to the table. So someone may have an experience in developing a national evaluation policy or a strategy, or developing a certain methodology like rapid evaluation, or engaging with civil society, or how to engage evaluation champions. So there are so many different aspects that countries can learn from each other, from the experience of their peers. And so that's why I think that opportunities like this conference and other opportunities to gather is really a chance to speak with other countries who are also building or strengthening their national M&E system, and to explore what are elements that you might be able to adapt to your own country situation. And that's really an opportunity for countries to learn from each other.
Thank you so much. I could be here for another hour discussing this with you, because not only you have pointed out great lesson learned, but also I think that what I felt when you were talking is that you are really involved with the reality of the countries, of the challenges of public officers face every day in order to shape an M&E system. Something really technical that sometimes, as you said, Karen, nobody understands, or at least not in the same way. And also, in my words, we don't know how to eat it, right? It's like really difficult to start thinking what an M&E system is for. And I think that one of the things that you pointed out in different words is that they are doing this to improve their policies and to improve the lives of the people that live in those countries. So that's why M&E systems are so important. So in order to keep on going the conversation, right now we're going to break out in the rooms, in the different regional rooms that you already gathered. And it's great to see that we are already half the room, because this is a real big room. And sometimes it feels lonely here, but it's great to see that you're already there. So we're going to divide in these groups, and we want you to talk. We want you to hear how this first regional discussion resonates in your national perspective. And afterwards, we're going to take all those national perspectives again in this panel, just to have a wrap up, but also, and I will take Emil's words for it, to see how, if cooperation is the game, how can we better play it? So let's go to the room and let's start. So Licia, Chantal, Sohini, Taku, you're the people in charge. Thank you. Want to leave your... Go ahead. If the Asian group could move together, it will be very helpful so you can listen to each other, please. Thank you. Please wrap up. 5 more minutes. Please wrap up. Sorry to break the conversations. I was, walking around the ballroom and I was really amazed about not only the profound stories, but the passionate way that you talk about them. So thank you so much for engaging. And as we talked at the beginning, this World Cafe session was about hearing you, knowing your stories, and not only being sympathetic about it, but engaging with them. So thank you so much. So we only have a couple of minutes just to close it up. Just to give the regional panelists one last comment about what was the main takeaway from the groups. So if Karen also can come to the front, that will be great. So let's start with Serena, and then we give us a big applause because you have been very engaging. Thank you.
Okay, so I will be very brief. We have had an interesting story from Morocco and Mexico, and two different journeys of evaluation with two different, unfortunately, final outcomes. We learn a lot about, the different why those systems started, and they started for different reasons. The Morocco one was more focused on learning, while the Mexican system started more for accountability reasons. And then we learn a lot about also the political influence on the system as unfortunately the Mexican system is experiencing.
I was in the Latin American and Caribbean group, and we had a very diverse mix of participants, not only from Latin America, but also from Africa and even from Australia, right? So on the question of what for the evaluation systems, first we had three interventions from Guatemala and Trinidad y Tobago and Ecuador, and the discussion was dominated by implementation problems of M&E systems that are actually explicitly recognized by law. So I think that speaks a lot to the question of culture, the general question of this panel, because it's like a very performative use of saying we want to evaluate and we have a system, but it's never really implemented, right? So that was the first part of the conversation, and on the second, we heard from a colleague from Brazil where they have a functional M&E system, as we've heard for a couple of days now, and the challenge there was the usual suspect in this type of space is evaluation use, right?
Yeah, so I was in the Africa group where we heard presentations from Madagascar and South Africa, and Madagascar shared a number of the challenges that they had faced in developing their national M&E system, a number of which have already mentioned came up in our panel discussion. So a lot of, let's say, familiarity with some of those challenges really resonating with the countries. South Africa shared on the evolution of its national M&E system, how they had really deliberately been building this system since 2007. But also, again, some of the challenges that they faced and the measures that they had taken to try and address those challenges. And then Tukunda also shared from some of the experiences of Clear AA, some of what they have experienced in their work working with African countries. And again, identifying quite a number of common challenges like data quality, but fragmentation of systems, and then we ended on really the use, like Emile was saying, the use of M&E findings, or actually more the inadequate use of findings in policy and decision making. And perhaps this is because we've been focusing quite a bit and investing quite a bit in the, let's say, the supply side of evaluation and the capacity to produce evaluations. And perhaps now we need to move more to capacitating politicians and decision makers to actually use the M&E for policy and decision making, so that evaluations of public policies and programs actually influence the next generation of policies and programs.
Thank you, Karen. Sohini, if you can share a little bit about what happened in the Asia group, that will be great.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Sohini from Clear South Asia. So in the Asia group, we had a representative from the government of India. We had an academic institute being represented for China. And we had Clear Pakistan and Central Asia represent Pakistan and its contributions to M&E. In this group, we spoke more of what does M&E look like for the government in practice. So for the Indian rep, Dr. Dash, he spoke about starting from problem identification, how does the government go about, particularly in a diverse country with cultural differences, how does it first try to unpack the problem that each state or district is facing, to what does the problem or the challenge actually look like in practice, things like data collection, when you have cultural language barriers. And then finally, to think about how does the government and the initiatives that the government has in tracking progress, things like aspirational districts to really help, districts program to really help some districts to really come up and catch up, so to say. And then Amna spoke about the experience in Pakistan, particularly from a bottoms-up M&E approach to really think about how PMIU, provincial, as well as then the planning at the central level, it all can come together from a bottoms-up approach. And then we had China, the representative from China, Madam, she spoke about how does M&E particularly look like for foreign aid? So when China is giving money, so that was a very interesting perspective to then say that, okay, it's not just internal looking, but when I am actually giving money to several other countries, how does M&E or particularly monitoring and indicator development look like in practice? So thanks.
Thank you so much. So thank you again. I'm Tania Lagarza, and thank you for your generosity to share and also your openness to learn. So thank you, and I invite you to give us a big applause for this session.
شعلك هذول مزيان ها هي